Welcome to Wizards of the Tower.
Roleplay.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about the mini editions of Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder. This is going to be episode 1, which is dealing with the Dungeons & Dragons side of it. Welcome to Wizards of the Tower.
Roleplay.
This episode, we're going to be talking about the mini editions of Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinders. Now, the reason we're combining the two is because the two are very similar.
Yeah, they are. A lot of people equate the one with the other. They have their differences, obviously, but, they also have a lot of similarities. And, of course, we're not going to go too far into, like, what's been happening recently with the different kind of intellectual property issues between the different game companies.
Debacle.
Yeah, so we're not going to go into that at all. But what we'd like to do is explore all the various editions and why some people prefer them over others. And but first of all, we would like to give you a little disclaimer.
Right. So first of all, we want to say, play the edition that you want to play.
Exactly.
Don't be forced by the company to go out and buy a whole new edition because that's what's new and what everybody in your group wants to play. We've had that problem in our group where when 5e came out, that half of our group wanted to play 5e and didn't want to play Pathfinder anymore, and the other half wanted to play Pathfinder. And it wasn't this let's split the difference. It was all or nothing.
Yeah.
So, and I would encourage you to expand your horizons on not just Dungeons and Dragons or even Pathfinder, but the other many of myriad of RPGs out there, like One Ring or Morkborg or Old School Essentials or Dungeon Professor DM's Deathbringer.
Yeah, there's a lot of editions out there. There's a lot of game systems out there. What we're more interested in is encouraging everyone to play and to have fun while you're playing, but also to consider why companies keep coming out with brand new editions all the time and why there's so much pressure for people to heavily invest in these new editions when maybe they really shouldn't, and maybe they should just stick with what they've got.
Because it does get expensive going out and buying all these books.
Oh yeah, we've heard people complain about it before. Yeah. It's like, why do I want to go out and buy, 5 or 6 books at $50 a piece or $60 a piece?
Right.
And of course that's why a lot of people, they go completely electronic with PDFs or whatever. But the main question, of course, is why there's so much friction here between all the different editions. Okay. So,
yeah, and even players.
Yeah. And so I haven't been playing very much, or very long. Delaney's been playing since first edition, which is great.
Since 1979. So
she's got a lot to say about it.
So first of all, we're going to pull out our book of the first edition Player's Handbook.
Looks really good.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read a couple of histories of TSR, and I know a little bit about, how these books were conceived and how they're put together. And it's really amazing to me to actually get my hands on a first edition book, especially when it's in such great condition.
Yeah.
But there's something that we got to bring up, and that's the binding quality of the old books.
Yeah, that's something that we've noticed is, this book is from the 1970s, early 1980s.
Yeah. We're talking over 40 years now. And
the condition of this book this is almost like, you can't say it's mint.
It's not mint.
And it's not new, but it's in very good.
Yeah, but the binding is still great.
Yeah, the pages aren't falling out.
The pages are still in good condition.
Bound really well.
You can look at it, and it's still bound really well. It's still put together. Yep. It's obviously someone has lovingly cared for it, but it's still in great shape. And then, that's something to say for a company that puts out books made to last.
Yeah. So, first edition, this is where I'll say I got my teeth into it, but actually it was the J. Eric Holmes boxed edition, which I'll put a picture up here of that edition. Excuse me. And so I bought that edition, and then within a few weeks, I actually had bought this book, and then the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual, which is sitting back here behind Tom's head. And of course there's the Fiend Folio and the Monster Manual 2.
Oh, they're great.
Yeah. So this is where I cut my teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And I played a ton of first edition from 1979 until the fall of basically the Gary Gygax TSR.
Yeah.
When second edition came out.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'd sit around with my friends from after school and on weekends, and we played this a lot. We would play the canned adventures. We'd play our own adventures.
Heck yeah.
And I don't know, I have a great fondness for this. And actually, I was showing one of our players this in our last session, and she said, "Oh, are you going to start playing first edition again?" And I said, "You know, if somebody had a first edition game, I would jump to play it first edition."
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, it's just, there's so much nostalgia here. A lot of my favorite stories of my characters in gaming come from this edition.
Yeah.
You know, there were a lot of limitations with what characters could play or what classes and their abilities. You had specific abilities. So if you wanted to be a paladin, you had to have a 17 charisma.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to have a certain strength and a certain wisdom.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to play a ranger, you had a certain strength, a certain dex or con or wisdom. I can't remember what it was.
Certain decks, I think.
Right. And and in your races, you could only go certain high, certain levels.
Yeah.
So it was a fun edition. The bad to first edition that I would have to say was the combat system. But, you know, once you figured it out, it wasn't that hard. The THACO system started at a 10 armor class and went into a negative armor class. So trying to figure out how to hit, there was actually a Dragon magazine that came up with a calculator that you could put together. It was 2 circles that you used one of those circle clips that you spread apart.
Yeah.
So you'd print it out on some cardstock.
Poke a hole in there.
And then spin it, you know, cut the holes with an X-Acto and spin it around. So you knew you could figure it out really quickly.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah.
You know, when you have a system like this, of course, I want everybody to take a look at how thin this book is. It's barely half an inch thick.
This was a 13. Well, I think it was $12.99, $13 back then.
I mean, it's barely half an inch.
So
thick.
Nowadays is a $60, $70 book.
Yeah. When you compare it to the thickness of the Pathfinder book, I mean, easily 2, maybe almost 2.5 of these could fit in the Pathfinder book. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what draws people to still look at first edition as being not just nostalgia, because I know there's a lot of nostalgia. Yeah. But what draws people to look at first edition? I think it's probably the actual the primacy of it. Okay, the actual existential system of it is that it basically it fits the basic needs of what people had when it comes to a game system. Well, and the whole thing is, of course, is that the idea is that you would take the book and it was just a guide, and everybody else would come up with everything else.
Yeah. I mean, the artwork was kind of fun. You know, you have this little basic line art. It wasn't all this fancy painting.
I mean, that allows your imagination to run wild, right? I mean, it was all about imagination. You know, the empire of imagination.
Wizard with a shield spell.
Yeah.
It was a fun.
For me, I like things that are simple. Okay, I like things that are simple. I like all of the happenings, all of the action to take place within our heads. That's the primacy of a role-playing game, in my opinion. Okay.
Yeah, you know, it's fun to use the miniatures, but a lot of times when we started off with first edition, we didn't use miniatures. I started migrating to the miniatures after I got killed in an adventure because the DM wasn't paying attention to what I said, and I'm like, okay, from here on out, we're using miniatures on a grid.
I think miniatures in a grid system is almost necessary in a way.
Now, and we know that Gygax and company used miniatures in their games.
Well, they also had sandboxes.
Yeah.
Because they played the sandbox games where they had like the big miniatures and they had the big armies laid on a sandbox. So that in itself is really cool too.
Yeah.
So when you get to first edition, the thing is this is what people fondly look back on because it's where they started. But really, what are we lacking in this that some of the next editions tried to address?
Yeah, so this is an Unearthed Arcana. This is also first edition. This brought in the Barbarian and the Cavalier and added spells. And you didn't have all these extra races like Tieflings and Dolphins, and that's an ongoing joke.
Yeah, Dolphins.
Now this book had a few pages that wanted to fall out, so it was just a matter of taking some Elmer's glue and putting it back in, and
what
and
you could do.
it's all back together again. So
So I think what it is when you look at something like this, that just added a little bit more of information.
so
It's like getting the first edition of a dictionary that didn't maybe have all the words in it you wanted, but then they came out with the second edition of the dictionary that had even more words that you needed. So it's still the dictionary, it's still that edition, it's just a little bit extra stuff they put in there. Okay, so how long did you play first edition before you wanted to change to either second or third?
when second edition came out, I don't know. It was just okay. New rule book. Let's check into it. New rules, new updates. So let's jump on the bandwagon and jump to second edition.
Okay.
So here's the second edition player's handbook.
So I haven't really taken a look at this that much. So
And this is where we started getting into the better artists that TSR was bringing in.
so why is it called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons? Because
Well, this one says Advanced Dungeons and Dragons too. Now, the original Dungeons and Dragons white box
yeah,
or OS or original OD&D
yeah,
was totally different. I never had a copy of that.
okay. Those are probably pretty rare.
They are rare. They're rather expensive too if you wanted to find one on eBay.
This is a little warped, but the pages are still in good shape. A lot of information in this book. Now, you take a close look at it, this book's getting thicker.
Right.
Okay. Now we're close to 3/4 of an inch, maybe even more.
Right. And now we're talking a $20 book compared to the $12 book.
Yeah, now it's coming up. And this book's in pretty good shape. But it's kind of one of those things where, all right, we're adding some more stuff in it. So it says right here, the newly revised, expanded, and updated version of the AD&D game provides everything players need to enter a world of fantastic role-playing adventure. Okay? So
part of it was I think
basically added
they wanted to get Gygax's name off of this too.
Well, I know
Because
that.
if you notice, you got Gygax written right on the front of that one, and right on the front of that one. So this one, you notice, there's no Gary Gygax mentioned in there.
Let me look real quick.
Now I'm sure if you open up the front page, it may say rules as created by E. Gary Gygax.
Well, it's mainly TSR.
Yeah.
David Zeb Cook, Steve Winter, John Pickens.
To say they stripped out Gary Gygax's name.
He's not here. Oh, wait a minute. Here it is.
Thanks.
The AD&D game probably never would have existed without the work of Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson.
Yep.
That's all they got. They got a little couple sentences in there in the very beginning.
Way to strip out his name so he doesn't get as much money.
Yeah, so it's off the cover.
Now, the one thing that they did on this is the line art, some of it is black and white, and then they started adding color into it.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend of anybody who's really interested in this to look at the YouTube documentary about the artists who worked for TSR. It's fascinating.
Blue art.
And you get to see, some of these people in there who made this work. You get to see, how they struggled to find themselves as artists, and it's a very interesting story. So we have second edition here.
Now, second edition
When
was
did it come
pretty
out?
much. Oh gosh, when did this come out? I think it was. I want to say in the early '90s. Your eyes can read it better than me, but the credits here. I want to say the '90s, and I'll put up an actual time frame up here.
Yeah,
It was the '90s. I know that.
it's not saying. So, wait, 1989.
1989.
Okay, so this edition came out in '89.
Yeah.
So we're talking, 15 years after first edition came out? They came out with second?
This book came out in '77. The Dungeon Master's Guide came out in '79.
So 12 to 13 years.
Right.
So people played this edition, first edition, for like 12 or 13 years before they finally came out with the second edition.
Right.
Now, what worked well with that edition for so long that it was able to function, all those years, and then why did they have to put out a second edition? Was it simply because they wanted to get Gary's name out of it?
Yeah. A lot of it
That's
was
what
to get
a lot
heroes
of
out.
people think. Okay, so now you understand why we're talking about kind
But
of
it's-
edition wars here.
It's basically the same system with THACO. And,
Yeah,
You know, there's a few expanded rules in it.
Yeah.
The classes are the same. You didn't have the restrictions. I don't think you had the restrictions on leveling like you did in first edition, or with what characters could play.
Yeah, I mean, sure, they tweaked it.
Yeah.
Okay, so they tweaked it one way or the other.
Yeah.
Okay, but the thing is, all right, the original gaming system functioned quite well for a long time, many years, before they had to come out with this.
Yeah.
And if the real reason they had to come out with this was simply to get rid of Gary Gygax's name out of it so they didn't have to pay him any money, or Dave Arneson specifically, of course he'd already been screwed. The thing is now that's why we're looking at this as an episode of Edition Wars. It's like, what makes these two better than each other?
Right.
Truly. Okay? And I know there's going to be a lot of
We held
opinions.
up under Tharkana, so let's hold up the player's handbook and the player's handbook.
Okay, what makes these two better than the other, right? And I know there's going to be a lot of opinions, and
Right.
and we welcome your opinions on this as long as they're polite, okay? So, you had the second that come out.
Well, so then the kind of the cool thing with second edition is, just going to pull out one of the books here, is you had the player's options, skills, and powers, which this added in something that third and 3.5 added in, which was basically skills. So now your character's not just a fighter, but now he's
The skill tree.
you got skill trees. So
I wonder where that came from.
whether you're forging or creating weapons,
Yeah. Knowledge.
knowledge
skills,
and skills,
professions.
more rules for psionics.
Yeah. I always wanted to play.
Proficiency mastery.
I always wanted to play a psionics campaign.
That would be interesting.
It'd be interesting.
With mind flayers.
Yeah.
Intellect devours.
Yeah.
So this added in kits and things too for your character classes.
I mean, it's a lot fancier. You've got a lot of color print. You've got bright red print. You've got all kinds of page detailing. You've got all this artwork in there. And you can tell they put a lot more money into
so
these
here's non-weapon
editions.
proficiencies that they added in.
Yeah.
So this is something that was added in at third edition that was actually in second edition.
Okay. So,
But it wasn't. This was an option where it became standard rules
For third.
in third and 3.5.
ah, okay.
But it still, like I said, used the THACO system to hit armor class 0.
So we know someone who plays second edition, right?
We do.
Okay.
We do.
All right. So I think that's wonderful. There must have been enough added in to second edition to make it more worthwhile than playing first edition.
He feels that every other edition afterwards has become too much fluff and too easy, and
Well, we were going to talk about Fluff and Bunny, but we weren't going to do it quite yet.
no.
No.
We'll hit upon that.
Yeah, we'll hit about that in a little bit. But so he thinks that they're starting to get kind of padded and there's adding too much to it.
When you start getting into third edition, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, third edition is a little more complex.
Yeah. No, I really liked and embraced second edition. I didn't get to play that much second edition because trying to find players or trying to find a steady group. There were a few times we played, and I always loved the option for the skills. I thought, wow, that's kind of added in now. Now you're not just saying that you were a carpenter or that you were a blacksmith or you were a brewer by random character generator from the DMG.
Yeah.
You're actually proving it now with the skills.
And you can affect gameplay with those
Right.
skills. So you can make rolls to check them and to see whether or not you can succeed during actual gameplay.
Yeah.
Which is something that the rest of us who play more advanced editions know about, that we can do all the time. You know, it's like, well, our wagon's broke. Who's the farrier here? I want you to make a check and see if you can repair the wheel.
Right.
That thing. Okay. Our archers who make their own arrows. Okay, well, you're a Fletcher. All right. So
Yeah, which was something you couldn't do in first
Yeah.
edition. Maybe you were a bow or fletcher as your skill, but how do you make them?
Yeah.
You know, there was no rules for that, so you'd have
Yeah.
to create rules for it.
Yeah.
So next we'll get into 3 and 3.5. Now, we went looking for our old 3.0 book, and we couldn't find it. We found 3.5 books.
I have a sneaking suspicion that someone who used to be in one of our old games
Might have mistaken.
might have mistaken their 3.0 for a 3.5 and walked out with the 3.5, or walked out with our 3.0 and left one of their 3.5s here.
But it's basically the same. The cover
Yeah.
is slightly different. Now, the difference with 3 and 3.0 is there were some... that's just our names in there.
Oh yeah.
There was rules updates.
Yeah.
And they changed out some of the characters and made them different. The Ranger became slightly different. I think the Ranger started off with 2d8 hit points and then went to 8 hit points after that.
Yeah.
Whereas in 3.5, I think they changed that back to regular D10.
Rangers are D8. Remember that?
Yeah,
they were
D8. So
they were a smushy class, which was weird.
Right. Now you start getting into a book that runs you. I think it was like 30 or 39.99.
I think about $40. I remember.
You can read that right there.
Yeah, I mean they were about $40. Okay, so this is 30.
Yeah.
$30.
So they've gone up from $12 to $20.
So this is a Wizards of the Coast edition right here. It's
now
got their
this
logo
is when TSR went defunct and Wizards of the Coast bought them, so they decided, well, let's change the rules altogether and rewrite it. And they had Monty Cook helping them out write the 3.0 and 3.5. Now Monty did help, I think, in the 2.0, but with 3.0 he was full on in it. Now they changed the combat system in 3 and 3.5 to be a D20 driven system. More so, these were all D20, but now it was, you didn't have 10 armor class, a minus 10 armor class. A armor class of 10 was your base, and then it would go up from there.
So the look of these books, this is my first introduction to D&D right here. It's 3.5. This is when I started playing with Delaney. And of course I bought one.
But you were familiar with the other editions, weren't you? You heard about them.
I heard about them, but I didn't know much about them. I mean, this is when you start getting into a lot of information in here. You can see the text is just very dense.
And skills.
Very dense. And they start talking about gameplay, and the gameplay is this
movement.
And that. Movement. So, and the artwork becomes a little bit different. It's more like these line drawings. Everybody can see kind of like how they used to do the weapon line drawings. They look almost like museum guides in a way that thing is put together. And of course it's put together like a spell book or a sketchbook. You can see the cover. Yeah. So when you open it up, it's almost like somebody's sketchbook that they're putting together. You have these kind of sepia tone drawings, which are kind of weird. And stuff like that. So I remember going through this thing front to back and still not really understanding so much a lot of it because it's very dense. There's a lot of density in here, and it starts getting dense. And this is really about about as far as I can go mentally when it comes to playing games. When you have a book of that kind of density, there's a ton of stuff in there. But now the thing we used to always say though is that there's rules for everything in Pathfinder. But there's not always rules for everything in D&D 3.5.
Yeah, there were a lot of rules in there, but there wasn't every rule.
Yeah. Now,
one of the things I'm going to kind of throw back to the second edition and third edition, you started getting the bloat. Now, with first edition, we didn't have a new book every 3 months or 6 months. It'd be years sometimes before we get a new book.
Yeah.
And then with second edition, you started getting all these new books. And with third edition, it was a new book all the time. And it starts to get expensive, especially if you're a dungeon master and you're trying to keep up with what every player wants to play. Well, this character found out that there's a dolphin in this book, and they want to play a dolphin. Well, now your DM's got to go buy the book to know about somebody playing a dolphin.
Yeah. We start to get, and I think bloat is a good term for it. Okay, we start to get to the point now where companies start thinking, how can we make more money?
Yeah.
Well, let's just churn out more books, and let's make it so that it's more desirable to play the game with 3 or 4 other odd books that, something about spells or something about advanced races or something about more monsters. I mean, this situation got to be crazy. I think if you look over there, we've got a 3.5 section that's like this wide.
It's wider than that.
And it's got everything in it. And it's got, how many monster editions? 4 or 5?
I don't even want to go there. And then all the books of swords and books of this and that and everything else. So 3 and 3.5, I got 3.0, and then when 3.5 came out, I wasn't going to buy it. I didn't know the difference. It's like, why do I want to go buy another 3.5 book?
Yeah.
It's the same rules. Well, no, it's not. It's changed. It's got some revisions in it. So I went and started buying the 3.5 books. And I played a lot of 3.5. I played 3.5 up until 4th edition came out.
So we don't know exactly when 3 came out, but 3.5 came out.
I'll put it up.
Okay, 3.5 came out in 2003. Okay, so essentially you're 1989, and in the between 89 and 2003 you had 3, and then you go to 3.5.
Yeah, 3 didn't last very long. I think it was only out a year or maybe 2 at most.
There must have been something about it. I know that they were desiring. I know that they were desiring towards financial gain at that time. Yeah. So they were trying to puke out as many books as they possibly could to get people wrapped up in the system.
Yeah, and 3.5 had a lot of the rule additions, updates and things that were fixed that they found from 3.0 that just didn't work.
Yeah,
it's like they didn't play test it very well or something.
Well, we know that they were going through a lot of problems and issues at that time, the company. And
that's when Wizards had bought them.
Yeah, and so they didn't have a lot of the people playtesting. They had laid all these people off. They'd fired them. They got rid of them. If you read those stories,
that was from second. That was from second edition.
Still, they were still morphing.
Yeah,
I mean, if you read about that, it's a sad time period.
Yeah. The edition we never played, and the edition that we kind of despise. Now, there are people out there that love 4th edition.
So the reason we never played it, okay, is because when you go through it, it's a much simplified version of D&D. They got rid of all the action charts, stat charts, and stuff that make it really possible for you to actually play the 3.5 edition.
It became more like World of Warcraft Tabletop Edition.
Yeah. I mean, even look at the artwork, which is probably maybe unfair to the artist because they probably got paid for it. But to me, it always seems like WoW. When I'm looking at it, it's like, hey, a book of WoW.
Yeah.
And at that time, WoW was really really popular, and they wanted to cash in on it. It's like, how do we cash in on the skateboard craze? Well, we'll make our own skateboards, D&D skateboards. Whatever. Yeah. Anything they can do to cash in on what's happening, they'll try to cash in. And that's kind of how the idea I had about this is when this came out, we were trying to figure out, what are we going to do? This sucks.
Well, we knew that 4th edition was coming out, and I had gotten this book and read through it, and I'm like, I just don't like it. And one of our other players, one of our other GMs even, had read through it and picked it up, and he's like, I don't like this.
Yeah. And
some of the other players had looked through it, and they didn't like it. They hadn't bought the books, but they didn't like it.
Yeah.
Didn't like what it had morphed into.
Yeah.
So, what happened? Well, Pathfinder came out.
Yeah.
But we're not going to hit Pathfinder yet.
Yeah, so what happened then essentially is we segued into Pathfinder, but we're not done yet quite with D&D.
Right.
Okay, so the 4th edition. Now, I'll admit I don't know a whole lot about.
I hear it's fun.
The rule sets of this, but when I first went through it, I was looking for stats because I like to play certain characters like clerics and rangers. I was like, okay, where's my stat charts here? A stat chart for a ranger.
It had the stripping of charts.
I was like,
you didn't have all the charts.
I was like, well, where is all the? What's going on here? How come not? Where is it? Where's everything? There's no stat charts. I was like, well, how do you? And I was kind of confused. I was asking Delaney. I was like, well, how do you figure out like what this weapon does and how much it weighs? And we were looking at like, well, it's not in here.
It's in there. It's just not in there the way you think it should be.
It's not the way it should be. So we were probably thinking, okay, maybe they'll come out and they'll address it with another book that's coming out. And then we started to see the bloat. How many 4th edition books have come out? I'm sure everybody has an answer for this. I don't know for sure. But I remember going into the bookstores and looking, and it's a very distinctive spine. It's got that white little strip right there. You can see it. It's different. See the difference between the two right there.
The lettering changed. And
it's got a very distinctive spine.
Now, the other thing is, I believe this is about the time Hasbro took over, well, sometime between 3.5 and 4th edition.
Still didn't say Hasbro here yet.
No. And I don't know if the other one does either.
We'd go in the bookstore and you'd see this very distinctive spine, and I would see an entire row, probably about this long, of variations of this book. Monster manuals, fiend folios, weapons.
Player's book 2.
Player's book, caves, sea monsters, whatever. And it was this line, I'm like, who is going to buy all of those books, because right now, okay, the original price for this one was
$49.
$35.
$35. Okay.
That's a lot of money back
Right.
then. $35 is a lot of money.
Yep.
And I think probably it got marked up in a lot of instances too. Probably
It may have
up
gone
to
up.
40.
I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah.
So we don't have much experience with 4th edition.
Never
but
played
what we know is we didn't like how the books were laid out. We didn't like that it was like World of Warcraft on tabletop.
Oh, and they got rid of some
And it
classes
was-
too, didn't they? They got rid of some things that you couldn't
They
play
did.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah, there were classes and things that you couldn't play and other races
Yeah.
and stuff. And so that just kind of turned us off.
Yeah.
So then you get into 5th edition.
All right.
Now, 5th edition is a good system.
It's a little bit thinner than 4th edition
Yeah.
if you look at it.
Is it a system I like? Not really. Would I play 5th edition? Yeah. It's got some bonuses. It's fun. It is kind of a combination of taking 1st, 2nd, and 3rd edition and stripping out all the extreme hardness to it. They made it easier for people, and that's probably why it's so popular now. You know, you've got everybody and their brother who would have like 1st edition. I can't play that. That's for the smart kids. Because that's always what I used to hear was, you play Dungeons and Dragons? Oh, you must be a freaking genius.
Because of all the
connotations with it. You know, that it was
the charts and the stats and the math
Yeah.
involved. Yeah.
That they thought you had to be a genius to play first
Yeah.
edition. Well, 5th edition, you don't have to be a genius anymore.
So I know that you played 5th edition in a game for a little bit.
Yeah, I did. Now, the thing that I did not like with 5th edition is I wanted to play a rogue, a dwarf rogue who was a tinker. I couldn't do that with this version because I'm used to having skills in being able to create whatever kind of character I want or feats. So I could take feats and skills and make this character who's not just a rogue, but who's a tinker who could go in and tinker with the trap and maybe make it work against the enemy,
Sure.
or make something that could, a trap that they could throw and and affect the enemy. You can't do that in Pathfinder or in 5th edition.
So apparently, and I don't know because I've never played it. I've only heard what people talk about. Apparently they streamline a lot of stuff out of it to make it easier to play. And this is, you're catering to people who basically have shorter attention spans. When this started to come out, a lot of people are starting to spend a lot more time on their phones and a lot less time looking in their books.
Yeah.
And the attention span started to get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. We're not going to talk about any kind of social and economic issues when it comes to that kind of stuff because I'm sure everybody's got their own opinions. But maybe that's exactly what this edition was thought to address. Is right again, they wanted to cater to people who wanted a faster, slicker, more centered, streamlined kind of game that they could bust out in an evening and then go home.
Yeah, you play 3 to 4 hours and you're done.
And then you bust it out. And now, I've heard...
Tom works with a lot of people.
Yeah, I work with a lot of people who play this, and what they like about it is how fast and streamlined it is. Because it's very, very difficult to get people to show up for games at all. And when they do show up, they're only there for a couple hours and they want to leave. So it works well when you do something like that your character can pop in, pick a couple locks, kill a few orcs, and then they got to go watch the game.
Yeah.
So then they split. And so the game that you set up then is not going to be these long game sessions like we have in our group, which is like 8-9 hours. They're basically going to last 2-3 hours, maybe at the most 4, and everybody's going to split and go their other ways. That's what this game system is kind of catering to, is these wham bam thinky man kind of games.
Now, 5e, a lot of reasons why it's so popular too, is you have all these influencers who are saying, play this game, play this game, play this game. And once again, we're not going to get into the whole OGL and the Hasbro debacle, but they're advertising for this company for them for free.
Yeah, in the rise of social media. Okay, that also happened when this game came out. Okay, You have a combination of people who spend a lot of time on their phones, the rise of social media, and this game. Well, how do you juggle the three together? How do you make them work? But one thing is you have the influencers who look at this and are like, okay, I get paid by how many people watch my show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to convince people to play this game. And then I'm going to do like a how-to guide on my show how to play this game. So I'm basically going to walk them through it, how to get started with characters, how to create adventures,
how to do this and
how
that,
to do this and that, and move along. And so that's, you get with the rise of the influencer, okay? More power to you. If you can make it pay, great. That's your job.
Yep.
That's fine. This is the D&D as franchise, okay? The 7-Eleven you started didn't work, all right? Neither did the Chick-fil-A. But the D&D is going to work for you this time. So it's your franchise.
Yeah.
How to make money out of it, okay? Is that wrong?
No.
Should that not be right? I mean, I'm not going to go into that when I say that, but keep in mind that role-playing games were very intellectually involving, and they were very
it was an escapism.
It was escapism, but they're very in-depth. They were geared towards people who had very, very vivid, involved imaginations. That's why you get a lot of stuff like all these figures, and you get these castles that we make, and you get all these other influences on the games, stuff from Tolkien, stuff from Howard, stuff from all the other people, and they all come together and they form this kind of incredibly dense world. That's where the role-play games exist. The role-play games of today are different. They exist in much lighter, sort of fluffier, more nebulous worlds.
Right, and that's kind of, we hit upon the term fluff and bunnies. I see a lot of that with 5th edition. Hey, let's play the dolphin.
That's a running joke that we have about.
Let's play
dolphin.
The bunny cleric. The anthropomorphic bunny cleric, or bunny thief, or whatever.
Well, the book caters to those who they think is going to be their audience.
Yeah.
I made a joke before about let's get the D&D skateboard out because we're trying to get skaters to play and that kind of stuff. It's like let's get people who are heavily involved in anime, more involved in gaming, because that's an untapped market. And so when people started aiming toward market research and marketing to various groups of people with their game, what happens is you begin diluting the game out to where it almost doesn't make sense anymore to even play it.
Now, somebody like Professor Dungeon Master loves playing 5e, but he finds that 5e is too easy. There's almost no character deaths. You have short rest and you have long rest, and you can do this and that. So it's not as deadly as what 1st edition was. 1st edition, you go to 0 hit points, you're dead.
Well, a lot of that is, when you play computer games, you save. So if your character dies, you just go back to your previous save. Yeah. Well, you can't really do that in role-playing games. You can't back it all up, to the previous thing before the orc hits you, that kind of stuff. It's all designed to keep people interested in the game so that they don't feel upset when they die. Okay? Yeah. Trust me, I've had a few characters killed, and it sucks when they die. It really does. Okay? And it really does when they die. So what do you want to do? You want to make people feel better about playing by making it very hard to die. But by making it very hard to die in the game, you take away the edge. And I don't find that there's a whole lot of edge in this game.
And I personally like a more adult-centric game. If I'm going to die, it's because I screwed up or my dice weren't with me.
Yeah. I mean, that's the consequences. The thing is, the old role-playing games taught you some lessons about stuff, how to be careful, how to be a better tactician, how to complete strategy, how to work as a team.
Think before you act.
Think before you act, how to work as a team. Imagine consequences. Okay, anticipate, don't overreact, that kind of thing. This game, and a lot of other games like this that work along this new kind of idea of fluff and bunny, basically rewards you for screwing up.
Yeah. Now, like I said, 5th edition is a fun edition. I'm not going to knock it. It's fun. I would play it. It's just not the edition that I'm not going to DM this to my group. If somebody in our group wanted to say, hey, I want to play some 5th edition, I'm like, fine.
You DM it.
You DM it and I'll play it.
I'll play it, but you're DMing it.
Yeah. It's just not what I want to DM and put into my world.
Yeah.
So we're actually going to end right now with the Dungeons and Dragons side of it.
Yeah.
And we're going to come back with another episode talking about the Pathfinder side of it.
Yeah, and that to make it complete when we talk about Edition Wars, we have to bring in the rival of this game of D&D, and that would be Pathfinder. And so we're going to talk about that next.
Okay, so anyway, we hope you liked this episode and that you'll like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, spread the word, tell your friends about us. We're not here to make money. We're not influencers. We are here to tell what we enjoy, we like, and if you get something out of it and you can use it for your own game, great. If not, hey, that's fine too. Maybe you learned something, maybe you don't. I know I learn something every day. But anyway, thanks for watching Wizards of the Tower.
Role play.
And may all your adventures be epic.
And keep on rolling.
Thanks, folks.